it was delayed. So we need to pause for just 2 more minutes.
All right, you let me know when it's ready to start and we'll pretend none of that happened.
Thank you.
Sure.
That was rehearsal. We're ready.
Okay, I think we're good to go, actually. Okay.
We're ready, we're recording.
We're ready. Thank you for bearing with us as we deal with the technological issues.
No problem, we'll try this again. So thank you for joining us at our May 27th regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission meeting hearing. And we will agenda item 1, roll call.
Okay, Commissioner Donaldson?
Here, present. There.
Commissioner Jennings?
Here.
Commissioner Kent?
Here.
Commissioner McLeod?
Here.
And Chair Waddy?
Here. We will move on to item 3 on our agenda, which are ex parte communications. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose? Commissioner Jennings.
I need to disclose ex parte communications with the applicants for the project at 844 Jackson Street.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Great. We will move on to item 4 on our list, which is the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted on by one motion unless a member of the commission or a member of the public wishes to hear those items. We have 3 items on the consent calendar. First up, item 4-1, the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes of April 29th. Item 4-2, Planning Application 20-017, Design Review and Conditional Use for 844 Jackson Street. And item 4-3, Planning Application 20-020, Design Review and Conditional Use at 619 Curtis Street. Do any commissioners wish to pull one of these off consent?
I wish to pull, sorry, I'm jumping in, 844 Jackson, just so I can separate it from the pack, because I need to recuse myself on that.
Okay. Commissioner McLeod?
I'd also like to talk about the Curtis Street project.
Okay, so that leaves us with the minutes. I guess we need to open this up for public comment. Do we have any public comment noting that the 2 projects 4-2 and 4-3 are being pulled off consent? Do any members of the public wish to pull the meeting minutes off the consent calendar?
Chair, I have a hand raised. I'm not sure if she is raised for the minutes or not, so I'm gonna let her speak real quick and see if it's for the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy, could you let Ruta LaFranco talk, please? Sorry, hold on a second. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Maybe Chair Waddy, you have the co-host function. Could you let, actually, never mind, her hand went away.
Great, and just to reiterate for members of the public, this is just for the meeting minutes. So seeing as we have no hands raised from the public, do we have a motion?
I don't know if I'm on. I'll move approval of the consent calendar, which now exists of the minutes from the meeting of April 29th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So on that vote, we'll call individual commissioners here. So Commissioner Kent.
Here, yes.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings.
Yes.
I also vote yes on that. So the meeting minutes have been adopted. Why don't we will then, since the next two items have been pulled off the consent calendar, we will move first to 844 Jackson Street, which is item 4-2. Commissioner Kent, you need to be recused. Is that correct?
Yeah. So how do I go about recusing myself here? I just I'll walk away. I'll just walk away.
Turn your video off.
Yeah, maybe mute and step aside.
Great. With that, why don't we, does staff have a brief presentation for 844 Jackson Street?
Sure, I can do a brief summary of the project at 844 Jackson. The applicant is seeking design review and conditional use permit for a single-story rear addition at 844 Jackson. The subject property is a 5,000 square foot lot with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1,117 square foot house built in 1914. The applicant is proposing a net addition of 150 square feet to the rear of the home and interior remodeling to accommodate a new bedroom, 1/2 bathroom, and a laundry closet. The exterior of the addition is proposed to be a combination of hardy cement board lap siding and with a shingle gable roof to match the existing architecture of the home. Altogether, this would result in a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bedroom, 1,267 square foot home with a maximum height of 18 feet. Parking is provided in the existing garage, detached garage, and a conditional use permit is required to horizontally extend the existing non-conforming north and west walls located 3.1 feet from the property line.
Okay,
And with
great.
that,
Great. Why don't we open up? Do commissioners have any questions for staff? No questions, just comments. Okay, then with that, why don't we go ahead and open it up to public comment on this item? Again, this is item 4-2 for 844 Jackson Street.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to supplement my written comments, which were previously submitted. I live next door to 844 Jackson Street on the north side. I'm the property owner here. I have 3 concerns with the proposed conditional use permit at 844 Jackson Street. Please note that accommodating my concerns will continue to preserve the current street view. Number 1, protect my trees and roots. I have several mature trees in my backyard. All are fully on my property. The trees and roots in closest proximity to the property line can be damaged or destroyed by excavation and placement of a new foundation where none currently exists. Please hold the applicant accountable for the protection of my trees, roots, health, and longevity by requiring the guidance of a consulting arborist. 2, compliance in the setback area. Some of the existing house at 844 Jackson Street is out of compliance.
Sorry. Carrie, I'm sorry. Continue.
Okay, from the north property line. But the rear of the house, north and west, is currently within compliance at 5 feet of setback. Let me be clear. The portion of the house at 844 Jackson Street slated for demolition and expansion is already set back 5 feet from the property line and is in compliance. Please do not permit a new encroachment into regulated space where none currently exists. Please do not allow the house to move out of compliance with setback regulations. Please consider that a much larger, more towering and chunkier structure closer to the property line will cause crowding and visual detriment and will eliminate architectural symmetry, harmony, and cohesion and compatibility between properties. Please consider the needs for visual relief, privacy, peace of mind, and breathing room from my adjacent property to the north. Number 3, impact on my ability to earn a living. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. The COVID-19 pandemic requires me to work exclusively from home now and for the foreseeable future. My ability to provide HIPAA-compliant telehealth is dependent on having quiet, secure, private communication. To earn my living, I now rely on my landline and my internet connection. Neither of these is available at my office building. I have never provided telehealth services from that office and will not be able to do so in the future. It is not possible to predict a timeline for my full return to working from my office. The logistics are highly complex. I cannot perform work functions in the context of excavation, demolition, and new building just a few feet from my home. If demolition and construction are permitted while I'm forced to work from home, I will face the potential of losing some or all of the patients I have, and my reputation and income will suffer as a result. I am requesting that the commission take to heart the necessity of my ability to earn a living from home and not permit construction to start until sometime in 2021. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers?
No, they're not.
Okay, great. Then the public comment portion of this is closed and we will turn it back to the commission for comments. Does any commissioner want to go first?
I see that the applicant has his hand raised. So I don't know if you want to give him a chance to respond.
Absolutely. I'm sorry about that. I skipped over the applicant presentation. So please go ahead, Mr. Williams.
Oh.
Good evening, commission members. My name is Madison Lee, and this is my husband, Buddy Williams, next to me. We're the owners of the property of 844. We in combination have been residents of Albany since 2001, homeowners since 2008, and we have 2 young kids in the Albany public schools. We love living in Albany with our kids, and our kids know about just everybody in the block. This is a good group of neighborhoods to be in, with many kids of similar age. What we have for review this evening is a modest addition to the back of our house that is essentially not visible from the street. Sometime in the 50s and 60s, a small shed-like addition was added to the rear of the house on a substandard foundation of brick and concrete. We are wanting to remove this small section of the back of the house and build a bedroom and half bath. The 2 boys are currently in a small bedroom, and although we've known it for years, especially during COVID-19, it is becoming apparent they are in need of their own rooms.
And because we didn't get 5 minutes for presentation, can we run over just a little bit with rebuttal? Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead, continue speaking.
Sure. So I'll just give one more paragraph for what we're trying to do. Because today the existing house setback is a little over 3 feet to the property line, and to create a viable sized bedroom, we're asking to extend the house to match the existing non-conforming setback as allowed by planning code. The net 150 square foot addition, when added to the rest of the house, is well under the allowed FAR and maximum height, and the 33-foot setback from the rear property line for the proposed addition is much less than the 20-foot setback, which is allowed by code. In terms of the rebuttal, as I mentioned before, our neighbors, including our adjacent neighbors to the north, are good people, and we're happy to have them as our neighbors. I called our neighbor, Carrie, last week. We had a discussion, and we discussed what was that time her 3 issues of concern. So in terms of compliance with zoning requirements, there is specific language in the planning code that allows for horizontal extension of a non-conforming wall, subject to design review, and the findings prepared by planning staff raise no objections to this request. Privacy to actually be increased between the 2 properties with this proposed addition, and there are no windows proposed in the new northern elevation, which faces the neighbors, even though windows are allowed. In terms of working from home, I'm not aware of any ordinance or law that would prohibit one private property owner's ability to develop their property because a neighbor doesn't want to hear the noise for whatever reason. We discussed by phone her need for quiet during a particularly sensitive time of upcoming work in the next few months for Carrie, which potentially could be a deposition. And I noted that we most likely won't be in construction at that time, but if so, let me know ahead of time, and we'll arrange it such that construction noise during her sensitive time frame will be limited by our construction crew. We'll just tell them, don't be banging today. If you got to do some work like that, let's call it off, because we have lawyer friends, we know what depositions are about, and that's a big deal for her. So we want to make sure it's really quiet for when she does that. In terms of protecting privacy and protecting her trees, we want to act, this is my last comment, we want to act responsibly and reasonably for the continued health of her tree. Previously, we've been asked not to trim the tree in question during a sensitive time of the year for the tree, and we comply to this request, even though the tree grows over our fence. I did state in our phone call that I was happy to talk to her arborist, and during construction, depending on what we find during excavation, because there may not be any issues at all in terms of the roots of a tree, would be okay to consider alternate cost-effective ways that are approved by our structural engineer and contractor to save any roots from a tree that is not on our property. We do not want our neighbor's tree roots damaging the future foundation of our residence. And if the neighbor's arborist can determine that removing or trimming back the roots won't harm the neighbor's tree, then they can pay to have that work done. We don't have any problems with that. I believe I have no further rebuttal comments. I just want to reiterate that we're talking about a net addition of only 150 square feet with a design that steps the roof down in height for the last portion of the addition. This is not a 2-story, 28-foot tall addition that extends within 20 feet of the rear property line, which is allowed by code. So I have no further comments, and I request you take the staff's recommendation and approve the proposed project. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. We'll turn it back to commissioners. Do any commissioners want to kick off the comments?
What?
Commissioner Donaldson?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, we're turning it back to commissioner comments.
Yeah, I think I had a question for the applicant, and that has to do with, I'd like to know what other design options were considered here. They require a conditional use permit for the extension, the horizontal extension of the side wall. And I want to find out if they looked at other design options that would have not required that that horizontal extension and not required a conditional use permit. In other words, extending back under the lot where there's a lot of space, kind of where the existing addition is, and whether that might make a viable project.
Yeah, am I still on?
Yes, I can hear you.
So, yeah, so what we did originally over a year ago is that we looked at putting a master bedroom and bath in that area 5 feet away from the property line back towards the back of the house.
Yeah.
And it was about 24 feet from the property line. So it was taking up most of that space. It was nice. We both really wanted that, and then we had it costed, and that took care of that. So the cost was, as everybody knows, it was pretty intense. So that was not within the ways and means. So this solution is the least amount that we can do to get a third bedroom to separate my boys. And so it's asking for a continuation because that makes a coherent bedroom in that plan. And it was the cheapest way to go. And to answer your question, we looked at a much more expensive option that would have taken up more of the views away from the neighbor. And it would have been more of a blocking of views and whatever else you want to call it from the adjacent property. And we decided not to do that because of cost.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense?
Do any other commissioners have any comments on this project? Commissioner Jennings?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say I do think this is a modest addition, and it is an extension of a non-conforming wall, which we do have provisions for in our code to, whether they're replacing an existing conforming structure or extending into an area where no structure exists. And if it is the right design and feasibility solution and doesn't have significant adverse impacts on a neighbor, then we typically approve those. And I think this is this fits well within the range of non-conforming wall extensions that the commission has typically approved during my time on the commission. I know that I believe the applicant could actually put a second story addition on the house and significantly increase the size of the house without getting a CUP, so they could just do that as a matter of right. And I do think that the cost may not be right for that, but there are other things that they are entitled to do under the code that would be likely much more impactful to the neighbor. So I think that what they're asking for here is modest and you know, a perfectly fine design for what they're trying to accomplish. I'm glad to hear that they're willing to work with the neighbor on issues around options for preserving the tree and mitigating noise impacts. And so I'm prepared to recommend approval.
Great. Commissioner McLeod, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a relatively modest addition. You know, I'm a little ambivalent in that I could see that the whole back end could be just pushed over a couple of feet, whether it's the whole thing, or it would impact the passageway space on the other side from the kitchen. They would lose a closet in that transition area to the back. So, I mean, I could see how you could do it, giving up a little bit of that hallway space and just pushing the bedroom over a little bit. But on the other hand, this is the kind of thing we have granted in a number of occasions. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I think the impact on the neighbor from this extension is minimal. I think the tree can be solved by the applicant and the neighbor coordinating with an arborist. And I think the design is presented, it's very nice, it's consistent, it looks like part of the house, it looks like it will have always been there, and it's a big improvement on the back shed, which was probably not very useful. And I think it provides a lot of benefit to the family. So I'm also prepared to support it. Regarding the noise issue, there's really nothing that we have in our planning code that I think addresses this. It's an unusual time. It's a difficult time for everybody. I understand that. You know, it's a difficult thing to know what to do about, but everyone has to make their own accommodations. And if that means setting up Wi-Fi and, you know, somewhere else or in your regular office, maybe that's an investment worth doing. If you can go back there and work by yourself safely while social distancing. So, you know, it's a difficult time, and we're all going to have to get through it, and hopefully with some understanding and patience, cooperation. So.
Great, thanks. I'll just wrap with a few of my final thoughts on this. I think this is a good project. I was fine leaving it on consent. For me, the issue when it comes to these conditional uses, again, as other commissioners have said, we've approved a good number of these. We usually have some good discussion around it. But I just think, you know, myself, I have a house where there's a non-conforming side setback situation, and there's a very awkward notch at the back of my house to provide for a code compliant side setback. And it's really awkward. It makes for a very awkward floor plan of a house. And I don't think it's as aesthetically pleasing, honestly, to my neighbors who have to look at this notch that then have windows that face directly onto their property. And so there's always, to me, this sort of push and pull, if you will, of privacy versus the setback. And so I appreciate the fact that where this building is, you know, extending the existing wall of the building, I think makes a lot of sense and is an economical way to modify the home. But to me, more importantly than sort of the economical argument, because I don't think that's actually sort of our role to be judging sort of the economics of people expanding their home, but I do appreciate that there are no side-facing windows. To me, that's sort of a good neighborly gesture. And I do very much want to continue to encourage, which sounds like the applicant is already intending to do, the collaboration around preservation of a large mature tree, and trying as much as possible to work around those roots of that tree, which will also continue to provide privacy and likely noise dampening for that matter. And to also be flexible with construction, sort of hours of construction, to be respectful, especially of this crazy time we're in, where people are working from home. But again, I think those are a little outside of the traditional planning lens. We are just looking at whether this is an appropriate project, and I would be supportive of the addition as proposed. So that wraps my comments. Do any of the commissioners want to make a motion?
Sure, I can move for approval of item 4-2 at 844 Jackson Street.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. So on that motion, we'll do, again, a roll call vote. Commissioner Donaldson,
No. Mhm.
Commissioner McLeod,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
and I vote to approve this project. That project then passes 3-1 with Commissioner Donaldson objecting and Commissioner Kent being recused. With that, that will take us on to so that project is approved, and we're moving on to item 4-3, the second item previously on the consent calendar, planning application 20-020, design review and conditional use for 619 Curtis Street. Staff, do you have a quick presentation on this?
Sure, I can give a quick project summary. Once again, this is design review and conditional use permit for a second story addition at 619 Curtis Street. The applicant is seeking approval for the design review and conditional use permit. The subject property is a 2,500 square foot lot with a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,272 square foot split level house built in 1938. The applicant is proposing a 228 square foot second story addition to the home. The proposed project scope includes converting the main level bedroom into a family room and creating a master suite on the second story of the home. The exterior of the addition is proposed to be clad in painted stucco siding with a cross gable roof form to match the existing architecture of the home. This will result in a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 1,500 square foot home with a maximum height of 23 feet. A conditional use permit is required to extend the existing non-conforming north walls located 7 inches from the property line. No additional parking requirements are triggered under this project scope. And that is it. I can pull up the plans if need be. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for staff before we get to the applicant for their presentation?
No, not yet. No.
See,
Just-
okay. Commissioner
oh,
Jennings, did you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick, and apologies, I'm just trying to pull up the staff report and it's not working, but is this extension of non-conforming wall, is it vertical only? Yes, okay, thank you.
That's correct.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll go ahead and open it up for the applicant to provide a presentation. Do we have the applicant on the line, Anne?
I don't know who the applicant is, sorry.
The applicant is Jason Caldes. I do not see him on the attendees list as of now.
Okay, since we don't have the applicant, why don't we go ahead and open it up for general public comment? And if we get to the end of that, we'll see if the applicant has arrived by then. And do we have any public speakers for this item?
No, no hands raised.
Okay, then we'll turn it back then. We will close public comment. Again, if the applicant pops back into the session, we can please let us know and we'll happy to take his thoughts. But otherwise, let's turn it back to the commissioners for discussion. Any commissioner want to start things off? And welcome back, Commissioner Kent.
Well, since I was the one who requested it be pulled, you know, if we look at the plan, most of the addition on the second floor is conforming. And then the two things that are not are two closets that are bumping out. And I just think it's you know, in design terms, I just think it's just kind of awkward the way these two shapes extend out towards it's 2 3-foot square closets basically. And I think in design terms, it just doesn't look right to me. I don't like the forms. At least that's the way I was reading the plans. It was a little hard to read that side of the house, but that's what I saw. Maybe Christopher, could you show us the second story floor plan?
Sure, give me one moment. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, if you just zoom in on that, it's really just the two closet areas that are sticking out. And you know, they're at 7 inches from the property line. These are just boxy forms that I think are really kind of clumsy to be sticking out like that. And I just wish there was a cleaner, simpler way to do that. You know, most of that addition, second story addition, is just kind of floating over the middle of the house. So sort of arbitrarily sticking these closets out like that, it just doesn't look good to me, and I don't think it would look good from the neighbor's driveway. I would rather see a consistent wall along that edge, or both those closets kind of pulled up tighter to the main bedroom and consolidated or something, but it just looks like a very awkward form to me. I can see why they put the stairways the way they did, to utilize the half stair going up to the split level bedroom and then turning the corner and coming straight back. But why that means the closets have to stick out and be non-conforming, I don't know. And maybe the applicant could address that. The closets are a little bit deeper than they need to be. I mean, a practical closet is only 2 feet deep. So this is mostly, for me, it's a question of design and the way it's going to look. Not even so much, somewhat non-conforming. I mean, when we get closer than a foot to the property line, then I tend to look at these things a little more critically. And, you know, I think that whole thing could be reconfigured somehow to make this a little more elegant, instead of these 2 closets that to me look like they're going to kind of stick out like sore thumbs. But that's what I have to say about it at the moment.
Trying to get a hold of the applicant, so we'll see if we can get him into the Zoom meeting and address your questions more specifically. This will be a bit speculative on my part, but I think I see what they were going for, because they want to get a window on that wall. The only way to do that is to recess that wall between the closets in, so that they can get a window, and then they've pushed this form out for those closet walls, I guess, to be consistent with the existing building form.
Oh, yeah.
Speculative on my part, but I think the architect would be best suited to answer that question. But just a cursory look at that, I think that's what they were going for.
Do any other commissioners have any comments? Commissioner McLeod again?
Oh, no, I'll let others respond. It's fine.
I guess I'll comment. And I see what Ian is talking about. And when I first looked at it, it looked to me like what Ann was talking about, that this was a way to have a window close to the property line, because I noticed they were talking about a firewall, a fire safe wall there on that side. So I hear your comment, Ian. It does look a little bit awkward. And I went out to the site, and you know, what I saw is that the house next door is like 7 inches from the property line as well. And it's set back farther, and it's been expanded up quite a bit. And I was looking at this, and I wasn't very bothered by having this little appendage sticking out with the small roofs over it, the height of the window at that level. It didn't look bad from the street, and I think it won't be bothersome from the neighbor's point of view, where they have a driveway right below that, and they have their own private sort of open space there, a nice yard right underneath that area. I think I didn't have a problem with it when I saw it. I did look at it, and I thought it's certainly unusual, but I felt I could approve it going up. It's one of these 25-foot lots, and they're very, very difficult to get a 1,500 square foot house on it. So I will almost always give people a break when they're trying to get a livable building on one of these narrow lots. So I think I support it.
And I did have a question for Chris. What's the setback dimension? I wasn't able to identify that on the plans from the front of the building to these closet projections. Do you have that dimension?
From the front of the property to the rear, I mean, to the closet projections?
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm not sure if it's explicitly called out, but we can take a. Yeah, I think the site plans are foreshortened, so there's no dimension specifically called out. It's 17.2 portion right here, but I'm not sure to the front property line. Let's see, we can go up.
I guess I'll just chime in while we're waiting on that. But my thought is I agree with you, Commissioner McLeod, that it is a little bit of a sort of a funky architectural feature, and I think they could very easily have extended the building to the opposite direction where it's code compliant. There's room to develop. Again, it would be helpful if the architect was here, because I don't know if that was intentional because of structural components underneath the building or whatnot. On the flip side, though, I do think it from what it's looking like, it's probably far enough set back that I'm not sure you would really ever see it from the street. And so to me, that's kind of what I'm balancing is, it might be a little unusual looking, but if it's not visible from the street, I think that's less. And I would agree with Commissioner Reynolds that on these narrow lots, it's really challenging to do a remodel and adhere to all of the side setbacks. Any other commissioners want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I'll just say I agree that it doesn't seem to me like you would notice this from the street. Like if you could see it at all, it would be very, you would kind of have to be looking for it. So under the circumstances of the 25-foot lot, I don't have a problem with it.
Any other commissioners before we make a motion? Seeing none, does somebody want to make a motion?
If not, I think I'm prepared to make a motion to approve planning application 20-020, design review and conditional use permit for a second story addition at 619 Curtis.
Do we have a second?
I can second.
Okay, and on that motion, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Donaldson.
Aye. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner McLeod.
I'm going to vote no.
Commissioner Jennings.
Aye.
Commissioner Kent.
Aye.
And I will vote yes on this item. That item passes 4-1 with Commissioner McLeod on the dissent on this one. With that, and on that one, just a reminder to the applicant to leave up the story polls on this through the 14-day appeal period. With that, we are moving on our agenda to item 5, which is general public comment. General public comment is reserved for folks wanting to address the commission on an item that is not otherwise on the agenda. And do we have anyone here to speak on general public comment?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. With that, we will go ahead and close public comment and we'll move on to item 6, action items or possible action items on the agenda. We have one item 6-1. This is planning application 19-067, design review for a new single family home at 836 Hillside Avenue.
I will recuse myself. Sorry, Chair Waddy, I need to recuse myself.
Okay, great. So Commissioner Kent will be recused. And with that, if we can turn it over to staff for a presentation, please.
Sure. Once again, this is planning application 19-067, design review for a new single family home at 836 Hillside Avenue. Some quick background on the property again. The subject property is a 6,264 square foot vacant lot located in the R1 zoning district with the Hillside overlay. City records show that P&Z Commission approved the design review and parking exception for an application for a new 3,640 square foot home back in 2001. A lot line adjustment was granted by the city a few months later, and a lot merger was approved in 2008. The single family home was never pursued, and the project scope was abandoned. Here's a street view of the property as it sits today. You'll notice the view onto the freeway. And before you tonight, the applicant is requesting design review for a new 4-bedroom, 4.5 bathroom, 3,601 square foot home. The interior configuration is proposed to be as a basement level with 351 square feet in area and includes a full bathroom. There's no interior access to the main portions of the home from this basement level as proposed. Additionally, they're proposing a main level with an entry courtyard, a 2-car garage, a guest suite, kitchen, dining, and living room areas. And lastly, a second level to the home, which includes 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, 1 complete master suite, and a laundry room as well. This project was last seen at the January 22nd Planning and Zoning Commission hearing of this year. At that hearing, there are several comments expressed by both the commission and members of the public. In summary, these comments include a request to lower the building height from the street front, concerns of loss of views, parking on Hillside Avenue in general, exploring the possibility of stepping down the house an additional level with elevator considerations, to also consider moving the garage closer to the street front. Additionally, the commissioners also requested landscaping for the entirety of the subject site. There were concerns with the proposed building massing and concerns with possible refinement for the east elevation. And the commission requested some additional downhill streetscape view perspectives. As far as project refinement, the project applicant has taken into consideration the comments expressed at the last commission hearing. The modifications proposed to you tonight include a decrease in the building height by 3 feet, resulting in a building height of 18 feet at the street front elevation. Overall, building has been lowered closer to grade. Basement room has been moved to the rear of the property under the main level to be closer to the grade. The landscape plan now includes additional trees and encapsulates the entire site to prevent erosion as well as privacy concerns. Other modifications include a 6-foot retaining wall, which has been included on the landscape plan to conceal the open space at the rear of the property. The elevations have been updated slightly. Additional renderings have been included to show additional perspectives at the lower end of the property towards the rear. Here's an elevation of what was previously proposed at the last commission hearing. And here's what's proposed before you tonight. This is the proposed front elevation. Note that the building height at street elevation is now proposed to be 18 feet. Additionally, here's the proposed rear elevation, the proposed north elevation, and the revised south elevation as well. And you'll note that the basement level has now been added towards the rear below the main level, planting it further into the existing terrain. The applicant has provided 3D renders of the home to understand the massing and how it sits on the subject site. And here are the requested perspectives at the downhill portion of the subject property. And then just zooming in on the lower right-hand picture, this is a rendering of what the property would look like at the, I think the arrow is blocking it a little bit, but showing it on the hillside in perspective with the rest of the neighboring properties. Exceptional design. Projects which exceed a 0.45 FAR are subject to exceptional design as reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The new home is proposed to be contemporary in architectural design. Exceptional design treatments include aluminum frame windows, painted stucco siding, in addition to vertical board foam concrete siding, large wood paneled entry door with side light, skylights throughout, a balcony, and deck areas with metal awnings. The landscape has been updated and then has been included with the staff report and the plan set and as a whole. That includes the entry courtyard, the proposed plantings, hardscaping, and built-in bench seating. And here's just a snapshot of that was included in the plan set. Parking. 2 off-street parking spaces are required for new single-family homes in the R1 zoning district. The applicant is proposing to comply with the zoning requirements for off-street parking in an attached 2-car garage. Parking is proposed to be in a side-by-side configuration. Hillside overlay regulations. The purpose of the hillside overlay in general is basically to help regulate the maximum building height and minimum yard sizes. And just to highlight a portion of that code, this portion stipulates the maximum heights, both when measured from any vertical point and also when measured at the street front. Buildings are not permitted to exceed 28 feet at the street front. The applicant is proposing an 18-foot height when measured from the street elevation. Here is just a quick snapshot of the plan set that indicates that you have an 18-foot height when measured from the street elevation, and when measured at grade at that point, it is at 2611. Staff has received 2 correspondences voicing concerns with the loss of views, the proposed building height, and the overall architectural design, and also a possible reduction in neighboring property values. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA per section 15303. And recommendations. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the attached findings and conditions of approval. And with that, I am done with the presentation and can call on the project applicant if there are any other questions as well. Thank you.
Great. Commissioners, does anyone have any questions for staff before we open it to the applicant? Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, I do. One. Christopher, will you confirm, is that a basement room included in the FAR?
Yes, it is included with the FAR.
Even though it doesn't have any interior access, it's just separately. Okay, so it is included in the FAR. I thought so, but I wanted to affirm that. And then will you go back in your staff report and compare the facade that we saw the last meeting with this design for me again? That went by fast, and would be interested in seeing that again, if you don't mind.
Sure. One moment. Let me just get on back to the front. So this is the elevation that was at the last.
Remind me how high was that above the street level?
I don't know actually what it was specifically called out, but from here it was measured the dimension.
2811.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now show me the comparison. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, that's helpful. Mm-hmm.
Just really quick, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Do any other commissioners have questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead. Anne, if you can open it up to the project applicant.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, hi. Am I able to share my screen?
I believe we can give you access, yes.
Oh, okay. Double click to enter full. How do I do what? How do I share my? Oh, hold on.
I have to bring her up as a panelist before she can share her screen.
Okay.
This this pop-up that says I cannot share while the other participant is sharing. Here we go. Okay, I think I can do it now. Great. Hi. Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Mickey Hirai. I'm the project architect for 836 Hillside Avenue, and I presented last time we were at the study session. We just appreciate your department for being able to adapt and host these meetings during this challenging time. I just want to do a quick reintroduction of the owners at 836 Hillside. The Yu family has raised multiple generations in Albany, California. And Ty was born and raised, and now him and his wife and the 2 children live in the area, and they want to remain near their grandparents that also live in Albany. And the lot has been in the Yu family for over 20 years, and they're waiting for the right time to build. This family has been serving their community through their family-owned award-winning restaurant. And although the last couple months have been particularly trying, we hope to get this project approved so that they can thrive in their forever home. So we did appear before the commission for a study session in January, and the commissioners' comments were so thoughtful and helpful, and we really took each comment into consideration and adjusted the building accordingly. The resulting design is a vast improvement from the project that was previously presented, and I'd like to summarize a few key design points and then speak directly about how the building was changed since the study hearing. The first slide is showing just a summary. The 2 main challenges of the steeply downslope site was to provide access and usable open space to the home. So the stepping design of the building minimizes the footprint, which is comparable or even smaller to our adjacent neighbors. We have 3 open spaces, a front yard that is friendly curb appeal, inner courtyard that is accessible to the living spaces, and a rear yard that has become now a rustic playland adventure space. The home is designed to provide accessibility for cars and people. At the last hearing, there was concerns about parking on Hillside Avenue, and we have provided the 2 garage parking spaces, plus we could have 2 off-street parking spaces in the driveway. And we wanted to limit the slope of this driveway because a steeper driveway would be dangerous to pull out into the street since we're located on that tight curve of Hillside Avenue. We wanted to minimize the stair runs within the entire house for visiting grandparents and young children. This is an overlay of the elevations as previously submitted is the red, and the modified building is in the green. And we did decrease the building height by 2 feet, and the resulting height is 18 feet, which is 10 feet below the maximum building height, which we could essentially put on a whole nother story to this building and still be within the zoning code limits. Here are some views from the street from a pedestrian eye level. And since the garage is lower than the street, the front facade will not be much taller than the height of the adjacent garages at street level. The commission requested that the building engage with the site more, so we pushed the building down into the site by lowering the floor levels by 1 to 2 feet. Again, this is an overlay of the previously submitted design in red, and the green is showing how we pushed the building down. We also listened to the concerns regarding the appearance of the amount of empty space underneath the building. So we relocated this, in the red is the previous design for the basement storage room. We relocated it to the back of the building, which helps to anchor the structure into the ground at the rear. We also added a short retaining wall to the rear property line to decrease the height above grade at the rear, and also decrease the height of the structural columns. And it makes the rear yard a much more usable space. Let's see. The commission asked for the landscaping plan to address the backyard and below the house. So we added a lot of planting. Again, the changes are in green. And this helps to activate the space and also screen the lofted space and the structural columns underneath the building.
Ms. Harry, your time is up.
Oh, okay. Here's some views from the rear. And here's the rendering bigger. You can see our building sort of is hidden within the hillside of the other buildings. It's hard to point it out, but we hope that the commission feels that we've modified the design to address their concerns, the concerns of the neighbors, and can be approved tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask a
And
question?
sure, go ahead, Commissioner Donaldson.
I'd like to ask the architect, the retaining wall is a new item we've seen tonight. And I want to find out how that will transition to the neighboring parcels. And in other words, how will the ears or the corners of the retaining wall design? It's unclear from there. And you know, that retaining wall then will be 6 feet above the property below, which already has a big drop off into their backyard. So it's kind of, I want to listen to your thoughts on that.
Actually, these existing properties do have their own retaining walls, and we kind of took note of that because they're able to use their backyard more. So I think it would just be a little bit consistent with their neighbors. And this building as well to the rear of our lot has a big, they're doing a renovation. They're adding a whole second story. And so they have, you know, increased their retaining wall back there. The structurally.
Yeah. Okay. Have you done any design work on the retaining wall to see how it would transition to the lots on the south and the north? When I walk down there, it looks like even though they do have retaining walls, yours is going to be like 5-6 feet higher than the back of their property line. And I'm wondering about how you're going to daylight that area out.
Of the properties to our right and left?
Yeah.
Well, they also have retaining walls.
Yeah, well, kind of.
In their backyard.
All right. All right. Okay, that's good.
Any other questions of the architect? Commissioner Jennings.
Yeah, I was just curious if you could talk a little about that basement room. I didn't actually appreciate when I was looking at the plans initially that there's no interior access. And I'm just curious how the applicant envisions using that room, which it looks like it is set up with, you know, with access to the yard as well as a bathroom. So yeah, I was just curious, what's the intended use?
There is no, there's not internal stairs right now. We are, you know, maximizing our FAR. The use would be to go along the side of the house to access it, and it might be like a gym and storage space. So that's why we provided the bathroom so that they could, you know, wash up and get water if it is a gym, and then like a deck. And you know, we also added we took some notes from the neighbors and added some friendly swings to the underside of our building. We just see that sort of being an active like play space for the children.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go ahead, and if we can open it up for public comment.
Okay, Matthew Irwin.
Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm the house that's directly uphill from 836. I'm at 837 Hillside. And just kind of want to reiterate some of the concerns expressed by a couple of the neighbors already, that the mass of the house is much bigger than the surrounding properties. And also that the second story above the garage is inconsistent with nearly all the other houses on Hillside. 1 story above street level is the norm, except for the new house that was approved and is currently under construction at, I think it's 850 Hillside. So while the design is lower than, you know, the 28 feet maximum, it's kind of not in harmony with the rest of the street. And it impacts views on the uphill side of the adjacent neighbors, my house included. You know, a couple windows and our front porch, the view to San Francisco is going to be blocked. But also, you know, on the downhill side, you know, there's shadow cast and views affected. So one of the zoning code goals is to lower decrease negative impact to property values, and this design doesn't follow that direction. The property values of pretty much all the adjacent neighbors are going to be negatively impacted, as well as the street itself is, you know, has a different feel than what's being proposed. And lastly, I just want to say that it's difficult to get a full understanding of how impactful the design will be, because the story poles were never erected, as is required in the zoning code, section 20.100.10. I think those are supposed to be up at least 10 days prior to the design review, but those have not been put up. So it's kind of difficult to get a feel for how, you know, how obtrusive the structure will be. So that's all I had. Thank you.
And we have Ruta LaFranco.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Ruta LaFranco. So I am the neighbor immediately on the other side of the lot on 830 Hillside. And so to echo some of Matt's comments, I think at the moment it's really difficult to understand how the height of the property will impact our home. To one point, I know we don't have the poles to kind of get a gauge because of the height difference from the adjacent homes. I think that would be really helpful to see, to have a visual and to understand. It also would be really helpful to have a shadow study on our home. I think, again, because of the, let's say, unconventional height to compare to the rest of the homes in the area, it will present a very different shadow over our home and our property. That's really hard to envision at this time. It would be really helpful to have that information to kind of get a clearer idea of what that impact will be on our home. That's all I have.
Paul Ford.
I live at 841 Hillside across the street from Catherine's Walk. And I also wanted to reiterate some of the things that the other neighbors have mentioned, especially Matt. I live pretty much across the street from 850 Hillside. And while that has a similar design and it is contemporary, it really feels out of place. And I see a lot of people walk up to the Albany Hill Park and through Catherine's Walk. And it really is like a centerpiece that feels very out of place for the neighborhood. And so while they designed the redesign to bring down the height of the their new, you know, home, I still think that it's really going to add to you know, the downhill side of Hillside, and really be another structure that feels really out of place. And that's all I have. So thank you, and hopefully you guys consider that.
And that's everyone.
Okay, great. So with that, public comment is closed, and we'll turn it back to the commission for discussion and deliberation. Do any of the commissioners want to start with comments?
If no one else will, I guess I will.
Great, Commissioner Donaldson.
Okay, all right. Let's see, this is a hard one for me, and I had a lot of comments the last time, and it's a difficult one for me to decide what to think about this, what to do here. First of all, there's a lot to like about it. It's a really nice architecture. I think I'm very impressed with the design. I like the contemporary design. I really think it'll be a very nice home. It's too big for my taste. It's a little bit like a trophy home in a way, and that bothers me. But I don't think that should really affect my my thinking about it. It's just larger than I like. I'm impressed that the architects have gone as far as they have to listen to our comments and work to reduce the height. And to make it a little bit more of a multi-level home, less than a sort of a flat home on a hillside site. But I don't think it's gone far enough. And I would recommend like 3 changes or 4 changes that I'd really like to see done. I think the interior height of the second floor bedroom could be reduced by 6 inches. It'd still be a 9-foot high bedroom, and we'd save 6 inches there. I'm really looking at figuring out ways to reduce the height on the street frontage. I think the height in the garage could be dropped by 6 inches, and there we've reduced the whole thing by 1 foot. I think that if we move the house back and down the hill a few feet, we could drop the driveway or the garage level by another 1 foot, and we'd have the facade going from what, 18 feet above existing grade to 16 feet above existing grade, and that gets closer to what I like. And we'd still have a driveway that wouldn't be too steep, and it would be essentially pretty close to the same driveway angle that there is now, but the driveway would have to be longer. And if we did that, then I also have concern about the massive porch on the west side. It's what, 12 or 14 feet deep or wide, and I just think that's too large and doesn't need to be that way. And it could be pulled back. I'd like to see it pulled back, especially if the house goes down the hill. I'm interested in the retaining wall. I think it'll be okay. I wish we had a design showing how it would transition into the existing properties, because I walked it and I anticipate a problem there, an issue there. And we haven't heard from the downhill neighbor, but that 6-foot retaining wall is going to make their backyard into a very small cave-like space. I think it's already a very narrow backyard cut into the slope with a very high wall, and the 6-foot retaining wall would exacerbate that problem. We haven't heard from them, and I do see the house is under construction, but anyway, that's just a design concern of mine. So I'm not sure I can vote to support it tonight. I'd really like to see some more tweaks made to try and reduce that front facade, because I really do think 850 doesn't work. It's too tall. And this commission or previous commission, I don't remember if I voted for it, yes or no, but I was there, and it hasn't worked out. I don't think that, I think we let that one get too big and too high on the Hillside Avenue frontage. So those are my comments.
Commissioner McLeod, did you?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Donaldson's comments and concerns. You know, I think trying to lower it a little bit wouldn't hurt. But at the same time, I just want to back up a second and just say I do appreciate the applicants listening to the comments that we previously gave and working in good faith to address them and making some changes, which I think have really helped reduce the visual aspect of the house from the street and help it sit more into the site, even though it is still kind of tall in the back. But you know, I think the changes have been an improvement in that sense. And the view from down below, it doesn't look like it's zooming way higher than the rest of the houses next door, but more in scale with their heights and their sizes. I am concerned about the retaining wall a bit. That's a pretty big retaining wall to put on somebody's back property edge. And I have to assume there would be a fence on top of that. So are we assuming a 6-foot fence on top of that becomes a 12-foot structure on somebody's back property edge? I think that probably should be studied or shown to us a little bit more clearly. I agree, we don't really know how that retaining wall would transition back at the right angles at the property line. It might be better to see that. You know, I really like the architecture for the most part. I have a few misgivings about still the front bedroom facade. And I thought it was the east elevation before, but maybe it's the south, which I don't think is resolved at all really in terms of the window placement. The front elevation with the bedroom windows looks a bit generic to me. I don't really think it's very good. The way the windows are placed, it looks a little bit like an office building to me almost, which I think it could use some improvement. Other thoughts, you know, the basement, it does help to anchor the house to the hillside. It's probably beneficial for structural reasons. I imagine the tall columns would have been very, very expensive to do, so it probably helps reduce the cost. And I guess it looks like a home office or a gym, like they said, which I don't think is a problem. Other thoughts, the floor plan on the main floor, I mean, it just looks like a fantastic place to live to me. I think it'd be fantastic, you know, kitchen, living room, dining room area, looking over the bay. I think it'd be quite wonderful to live in. You know, I could see asking for a few adjustments, but overall, I do support the project and I appreciate the efforts that applicants have made to address concerns.
Commissioner Jennings?
Sure. I wanted to go back to what a couple of the neighbors said about story poles. And I wanted to make sure we were clear on what the sort of requirement is there. So it's my understanding, because I think it's a valid concern for the neighbors to be raising. But my understanding is that we don't actually require story poles on a site where there's no, where it's not an addition, where it's actually a new build. Is that correct?
Yeah, so It's usually done, typically with new construction, we tend to look more at 3D models as opposed to field conditions with the story poles in place. And so the last new construction that the commission looked at, which was 1198 Curtis, in fact, they didn't have the story poles because they did provide the 3D renderings.
Okay. And here they clearly have provided 3D renderings. And so, you know, again, it's my understanding that we accept those sort of in place of story poles, especially on a new build, and especially on a site like this, where I imagine just the structural issues with getting story poles up would be potentially a bit of a challenge. But okay, well, thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure we could address that comment from the public. I also really appreciate all of the work that the architects did to address the prior comments. I think I expressed last time that I was I think maybe all of us wanted to see the height come down somewhat and see the back, more formed into the hillside. And I think you've made steps in the right direction there. I appreciate the sort of open space at the front of the house at street level. So there is a big garage frontage, but unlike a lot of houses on the hillside, it's not the only thing you see. So I do think that's a good contribution to the street. And overall, I think that the height, while it is taller than the structures immediately surrounding it, I don't think it's I wish we had the height on 850, but I don't think it's approaching that height. And I do think the fact that the garage is at least partially below street level will dampen that the height somewhat. Would it be nice to see it come down a little more? Possibly, yes, but I think I could support it at the height it's at now. I do, the point about the retaining wall is an interesting one, and I think I would like to see and better understand how that is going to mesh with the neighbors to the rear. Although I think I would defer. I would be comfortable deferring to staff to review those plans and working out any design details that need to be worked out there. So I guess on balance, again, I think there perhaps are some tweaks that could make this project even better, but I do think it's attractive and fits within our standards and guidelines.
Great, thank you. I actually do have one question for the architect, if the architect is still on the line.
Yes, hold on just a sec.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Mickey. I had a quick question for you. So on sheet A 9.01 on the axons, specifically the northeast and the northwest axon, I had a question about the fencing, and I think that's inbound of the property line a bit, but it's effectively acting like sort of the edge fencing on this. It looks like on the northeast axon that it kind of stops midway under sort of that middle courtyard and doesn't extend all the way under sort of the back portion of the building. And I was just wondering if you could talk through why that's the case and sort of why the design choice was made to end that fencing treatment where it is ended.
Are you able to pull it up, Chris? No. The fencing treatment from the front yard to the courtyard.
Yeah. If you guys have sheet A 9.01 up, it's just the two renderings on the left-hand side.
Okay.
At least that'll visually kind of articulate what I'm trying to say here.
Okay. A 9.01. Hold on one second.
Sorry, what sheet were you referring to, Commissioner Wadi?
A 9.01.
Yeah, A 9.01.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, so that is it's actually not fencing. It's more like yeah, board form concrete. So it's almost like retaining wall, but it's not retaining any soil there. We didn't want to retain more soil at the back side of that courtyard. I mean, that's a lot of fill. So that's what.
Got it. So that all is retaining soil. It's not sort of a fencing type treatment.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we wanted to like taper it off to not have like a massive amount of fill.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense to me. And the reason I was asking is I was just thinking if it was more of a fencing treatment, if that was extended, for example, when you're looking at the northeast axon here, you know, if that were to be extended through that more
open area.
Sort of, yeah, the more open area, I think that does sort of help even a little more so ground it. But I understand that that is not a fencing treatment and that's a different type of request. So thank you for that. I'll just go ahead.
Or of like more of a green wall sort of fencing, but we also don't want to kind of enclose that space to that.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That's helpful. So anyhow, I would say generally speaking, I echo a lot of my fellow commissioners' comments. I appreciate the moves that have been made. And I also really do like the architecture here. I think for some new constructions, we don't always get the same sort of quality of architecture. I like sort of the playfulness of the different forms. It almost feels like sort of Tetris pieces, if you will, kind of being put together. And the sort of the middle building courtyard, I actually really like, to the point that I was just saying on the northeast axon, at least, I really like that view. I think having that mid building courtyard really breaks up the massing and makes it feel sort of like less square footage from the street than the total square footage of the building. So I think all in all, it's made a lot of moves. You know, in a perfect world, I think it could certainly hug the hillside a little bit more. I think unfortunately what we're seeing is also the play between sort of the buildable volume that's allowed under code and sort of to the neighbors' points on that. I am sensitive to the fact that this feels really tall compared to neighbors. I struggle a little bit with a building being 10 feet under the height limit and still saying it's too tall. You know, I understand that sometimes the first building that goes taller sticks out a bit like a sore thumb. But I do think we need to sort of respect at some level the fact that there is a height limit here and this project is well within that. It's well within the rest of the buildable area, but yet the FAR doesn't let them sort of fill in more volume under other parts of this massing. So I'm comfortable with where it's landed. Again, the general architecture is supportive here, and I think it's a well-designed building that has addressed many of the requests that we had. So I'm prepared to support the project today. Before we turn to making a motion, do any other commissioners have any final remarks?
I'll make one other comment. We had a neighbor from 8:30 talk about shadows, I think, and I appreciated that Megan tried to address the comments from the one of the other comments we received about the story poles. I think 8:30 is the property to the south, and I don't think that property is going to, because it has a better southern exposure, a good southern exposure, better than this house. I don't think that property is going to have any shading impacts from this building. They'll certainly be visible from 8:30, but it won't be. This building won't be causing shadows to fall, I don't think. Just from my own experience anyway, that tells me that shouldn't be a problem. So that's my kind of response to that comment we received. Okay.
Commissioner Donaldson, just as a point of clarification, just looking at it on Google Earth right now, it does look like 8:30 is to the north, for what that's worth.
8:30 is to the north. Then it could be shaded, but that's the property where all of the tall trees are right along the property line there. And I don't know that those are going to be removed. that's unclear. I'm not sure if those bushes and trees are on 830's property or whether they're on this property. And when you walk out there, it's hard to tell where the boundary line is exactly. So, yeah, you may be right. 830 would be the north in this one, and then this is 836. So you're right. You're right. 840 would be the other, would be the south side. Yeah, I'm wrong. Okay.
Just one point to clarify, because Commissioner Jennings had indicated it would be helpful to know the height of the project at 850 Hillside. And so I pulled up the staff report. That has a height of 17.5 feet from the street elevation. So it's they're somewhat comparable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Commissioner McLeod, did you have a raise your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with your comments about the height limits. This building does conform. And the neighbors also have the right to build higher in the front if they desire. So it's not like we're imposing something arbitrarily that the neighbors couldn't benefit from too. So, you know, although it does seem like it's taller than the other buildings, it is well within the guidelines and height limits and setbacks. So in that sense, you know, I don't have a problem with the project.
To counter that, and I hear you on that, and I agree, and it is strange to be looking at having concerns about an 18-foot tall building when the height limit's 28. I do have that concern, but this is the Hillside zone, and this is a large project that requires excellent design. So that's what's guiding me here and my thinking on this. That's why I'm interested in shaving a bit here and shaving a bit there, and getting it to fit into the neighborhood better. And I think we have the right to do that as a part of the conditional review process. And I think we have a right to do a lot and make sort of unusual concerns or follow unusual criteria when we're working on these hillside sites, just as we've done so much on the other side of the street with the front setbacks, where we've allowed some of those front setbacks to be very, very narrow, with retaining walls and sidewalks that are tall right out the side, right at the edge of the sidewalk. So I don't know. I think this. The hillside sites require special attention, and that's why I want to give it that. My thoughts on that.
Would any commissioner like to take a stab at a motion?
I'll move continuance. Continue to a date uncertain to review, to respond to some of our concerns that are expressed tonight.
Is there a second on that motion? Okay.
I'm ambivalent a little.
Seeing no second, I think that motion has failed.
There's only 4 of us. There's only 4 of us too. Yeah.
4 of us. With 3 of us have to be on the same page, I suppose. Is there a counter motion that somebody would like to make?
I would move approval of planning application 19067, while encouraging the applicant to take into consideration some of the feedback they've received tonight in potentially refining the design further before submitting for building permits.
Is there a second on that motion?
I can second that.
Okay, then we will call that motion. Commissioner Jennings.
Aye.
Commissioner McLeod.
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson.
No.
And I will vote yes on that motion. So that motion does pass 3 in support, 1 in opposition, and Commissioner Kent is recused. So that, commissioners, approves that item. That item is still subject to the 14-day appeal period. I guess there are no story pulls up, as we've discussed, so nothing to leave up, but there is still an appeal period. And with that takes us on to the next item on our agenda, new business, of which we have none. Item 8 on the agenda, announcements and communication. Staff, are there any updates?
Yeah, two things to share. We, in the interest of preserving the energy of our city clerk and Alan, we are going to one meeting a month. So we're going to stick to a schedule of the second Wednesday of the month. And I think that is also right now kind of consistent with the stream of applications that we're receiving. So we will not be holding that first meeting of each month. So the second thing to point out, and I'm sorry I didn't have it on the agenda, but it's kind of fast moving these days. The commission received a fair amount of public correspondence regarding street closures and Solano Avenue. And I know at least 2 of you reached out to staff to find out what the status was and whether or not that might be on the horizon for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Right now, it is scheduled for City Council for this Monday, June 1st. The agenda was just published at 5:45 tonight. So if you're looking for more information on that, you can access the City Council's agenda through the city's website, and you'll find a staff report with some background information.
With that, we already addressed item 9.
Could I say something?
Sure, Commissioner Donaldson.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna interject. You know, I want to thank staff and Chair Waddy for pulling this together. And it's been a long evening, but you guys have done a great job. And I know it must be hard, and I sure the background and working in the background as well is and probably Jeremy too. This is a challenge, and Elizabeth, you did a great job running the meeting, and thank you so much for your backup and doing your best to make it work. I just appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner. We are in new times, so thank you for everyone, and thank you to the public for participating and bearing with us as we continue to move all this business forward. With that, we are adjourned. So that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you all.